Hello and welcome to season 2 of the Boring AppSec podcast. Last season, Anshuman and I covered 10 AppSec topics from threat modeling to Gen AI, from build versus buy to software inventory, and much more. We had a great time recording that season. But this season, we wanted to invite more people to join our conversations. Anshuman and I are curious about the world of security startups. I co-founded CISO last year to help scale security design reviews, and Anshuman has worked closely with many startups as an investor and an advisor. So, in season 2, we're talking to founders, from first time to repeat founders, founders of product companies to services companies, and founders with a technical and business background. We have a killer lineup of guests. We had a lot of fun recording these episodes and hope you have fun listening to them too. In the first episode, we chat with Jimmy Mesta. Jimmy is the co-founder and CTO of RAD Security. Jimmy has spent over a decade in AppSec and has done various hats before becoming a founder. We had a great time recording this episode. We talk about being a technical founder, securing Kubernetes, if Kubernetes is even necessary, and much, much more. Listen in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Boring AppSec podcast. In this episode, we are super excited to have Jimmy Mesta with us. Jimmy has been in the AppSec space for more than 15 years now. He's had multiple AppSec roles with companies like Agilent Technologies, Redspin, and TrueCar. He was the head of security and compliance of Invoca and the director of security research for Signal Sciences. Signal Sciences, I believe, was later acquired by Fastly. Jimmy is also an investor and an advisor. For the past 3.5 years or so, Jimmy has been building his own company, RAD Security, RAD, in which he's a CTO and co-founder. I've personally known Jimmy because of his involvement in the Kubernetes and the container security space. When Kubernetes was just beginning to make inroads in the security industry, I've been following his journey. I believe he's a thought leader in this space and is very inspiring to see how far he's come along with his company. Jimmy, I was super excited to have you here. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, I can't top being a thought leader. So that's a good intro. I appreciate it. Happy to be here and happy to share the story and get to chat with you guys. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, sounds good. Do you want to start off by just kind of going over what is it that you're trying to solve at RAD Security?
Sure. Yeah. So the impetus for RAD Security, well, you kind of have to be part crazy and part you have some insight as you start to take the journey into starting a company. My background led me to this out of just seeing lots of pain, I guess. I lived through lots of pain, and most of that started about 9 years ago when I started using containers in production and then evolving to Kubernetes and how do we run this stuff in the cloud and what tools do we have that we can plug in to this ecosystem to at least bring that parity up that we had before with traditional IDS, IPS, WAF technologies. And all of that, timing wise, it seemed kind of a perfect storm. Everybody moved really quickly into containers. And I found myself, like most things, just going down the rabbit hole deeper and deeper and trying to understand the implications of giving developers, having developers build container images locally. How do they get built, like kind of created? Where do they get stored? What software are we using? How do we scan them? And then ultimately these pieces came together to me. Well, since we have time, I actually built a 2-day training course for the very first Loco Moco set. This was quite some time ago. I think it was just called Kubernetes Security 2-day hands-on training. I spent a lot of time building labs and all this different pieces. And it turns out that year, not enough people signed up to actually come. And this was many years ago. And I went to the conference anyways. And then a friend of mine, Jim Manico, who a lot of people listening will know, and he's probably a great guest to have on this podcast also. He said, hey, he does AppSec training and has for a long time. And he said, "Hey, let me see if anybody's interested in this. And I'll kind of ask my customers who get training." And he sent the course around, and it turns out there was a lot of interest, enough so that I had to. At first, I was taking vacation to go travel on site to like teach people about Kubernetes security, because there's a lot of companies that were moving that way. And then ultimately that led to offensive engagements, red teaming, architecture training, and enough so that I spent 3 years just independently helping companies, big and small, traveling all over the place, figure out container security. And as you can imagine, during that time, there were tools available. There's the first generation of kind of container security tooling, image scanning. Some of the big vendors, the Palo Altos of the world, were starting to dabble in that space. And I just found that as I was rolling some of those things out, none of them were really purpose built for things that were ephemeral, that were container based, like the isolation techniques we needed. The control planes were all different, and it just like people were trying to bolt on like this weekly scanner methodology to something that was changing every 5 minutes. And I just kept pulling on that thread, and ultimately RAD Security, combined with a very long-standing desire to start something myself, that all came kind of to a head, and we decided to try to address those issues, right? Cloud native infrastructure, container-based real-time security that provides real value, easy to use, and scales with your org. That's always been the mission, and we've been doing it for about 3 years now. So that was a long journey, but it's been a fun one.
Yeah, no, and I'll just add to that. I've actually had the opportunity to play with the RAD security platform once, and I was pleasantly surprised to see the entire kill chain sort of visualized on the screen, where it was possible to see how an attacker might, exfiltrate data by exploiting a simple vulnerability. So I think I haven't seen any Kubernetes container sort of platform that can show that. So I think, yeah, what you guys are building has a lot of values for sure.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and it's come even further since then. So we're
Nice.
always building new things.
Nice.
Cool.
Um,
Sandesh?
yeah, just want to take a step back and just talk about Kubernetes adoption and Kubernetes a little bit, right? I kind of feel like it's gotten through this weird adoption curve where when it started, it was only the most forward-thinking companies who would kind of think about using Kubernetes. It was really hard to use, but there were some useful things in terms of scale. And then it kind of came to a point where it almost became like the only way to deploy in production is to use Kubernetes, and then you have to hire people who have expertise. And then it went through it's too complicated for small teams. It only works sometimes and it doesn't the other times. And then in the last 9 to 12 months, I kind of feel like, I know, with kind of EKS and managed Kubernetes kind of becoming very easy to use, kind of feel like it's become kind of the de facto, deployment mode for companies of any reasonable size, as long as you have a technical team in place, right? Is that kind of a fair categorization of how Kubernetes has been adopted? And what do you think that means for security, right? Because I kind of feel like before the managed Kubernetes services were out there, securing Kubernetes was really like riding a wild horse, right? It was really, really complex. But now I kind of feel like it's a little more settled. I mean, first of all, do you agree with that hypothesis? And second of all, how do you kind of think about, if you were, I mean, you're a CTO, so you also run your own infra apart from securing your customers.
Yeah.
How do you think about, if you're a startup, if you're a new company, should Kubernetes be your go-to thing? Are there security considerations you should keep in mind before making that decision? And in general, thoughts on Kubernetes as adoption and kind of how security plays in.
Yeah, no, I mean, your timeline was pretty spot on. It was early days. So Kubernetes just celebrated its 10-year birthday, like a couple months ago. And 10 years is a long time in technology in general and like cloud. So people, even to this day, still seem to like bundle Kubernetes in some like bleeding edge sort of thing. It's enterprise boring software. Like releases are, on a regular cadence. It's extremely stable. It is not what it used to be, which is, my first foray was, I specifically remember 0.8. We were running Kubernetes in production, building it ourselves using some very strange combination of chef scripts and like bash and, generating our own certs and like sharing credentials, doing just terrible things to get this to work. And then things like RBAC were introduced. You're like, oh, we can control who has access to this. That's pretty cool. And then we have like secrets that, kind of emerge and different, ingress. And so all of this, like, piling on of functionality was really, I think, just leading towards, what enterprises were needing to use this at scale and like generically as a project. But it's still, for a long time, was like kind of a side project for companies. Like they were testing, like they would put a couple people on, like on the emerging technology team to like see if this would fit and how it would fit. And I really think that, to your point, the introduction of managed Kubernetes, which abstracts the control plane, it abstracts all of these, kubelet configurations, all the things that like, even to this day, everyone kind of hates dealing with. You're like the 14,000 flags you have to choose to like make sure you don't have anonymous authentication enabled. And you're just like, I don't want to deal with that. So managed Kubernetes, hit the scene, and it like that combined, in my opinion, with better CI/CD tooling, better packaging, the kind of OCI, as kind of the standard for containers, even some of the kernel capabilities for isolation, like all these things came together at once, and it just made it easy to run a container inside of Kubernetes. Like EKS was, if you just click a button, you can have a basically Google-esque infrastructure like at your fingertips, and that's compelling. But that like adoption just skyrocketed and everybody jumped on board. And I still think no one knew how to secure that particular environment that well. So that's when you saw like the OG sort of Tesla breach where they had a Kubernetes dashboard expose the internet in 2017. And everyone's like, wait, what's the Kubernetes dashboard? Do I have that turned on? And it's just like, I don't know what this is. And that's like when people were like, oh, I think this is like a thing we need to look at, not as just a checkbox of like, it's not the same as a VM. You have this whole control plane, all this access control problems, secrets management. The way networking works is not the same as you're used to in like a data center. So EKS did not mean like Kubernetes security was solved. It just meant we had more people using it. And some of the hard parts were kind of jumped to the side, but there's still a lot of work to do. And that evolution now, I mean, it's got to be the most profitable kind of product from all of the major cloud providers. Everyone uses it. And today, to your, the latter part of your question, if you're starting a company, I still think it's a good tool chain to use. I think, there's some complication in kind of building software, using containers, but with some of the continuous deployment platforms that are out there, like, not even a recommendation, just like Argo CD or Flux, those tools have matured in a way where you're like, the developer kind of has a PaaS, a platform as a service, and you're doing all right. Like we use things like Carpenter, they're like auto scale, and there's good, robust, mature tooling that makes Kubernetes to me a little less intimidating than it used to be, or a lot less intimidating. So it's a good choice. Now, if you're a website with a store like that, you're just like doing drop shipping something, like sure, don't do that, right? Like, don't make it unnecessarily complex. But like, if you're building software that has, scaling problems and you have different teams working on different things, and then I think it's still a great tool, even for a startup. It's okay.
Yeah. No, that I think is a good point. One last question on that, right? So when you think about cloud security or network security in general, you don't think specifically about like EC2 security or S3 security. These are just like cloud security, right? But even today, I kind of feel like even when you spoke about it, or even if I have other friends who run like cloud security companies, or even just general people who work in cloud security, Kubernetes security almost seems to be like a little special. Though in the end, like you said, it's a PaaS, right? You're using EKS, you're configuring EC2 instances, and you're configuring EKS, right? I- i- is this just a function of the fact that not enough abstractions happen? And like you said, it's a 10-year technology, whereas other kinds of compute are probably older. Serverless security is not as big as, say, Kubernetes security, right? So is there something inherent about Kubernetes which makes it a little more complicated to secure? Or is it just the fact that it's the technology itself is, like you said, only, well, depending on how you measure it, it's only 10 years old, or it's really 10 years old already. So let me kind of rephrase that. Is Kubernetes security like a specific subset of cloud security? And if yes, is that because of how complicated it is, or it's just that it hasn't had time to mature and become like a commodity which is simple to secure?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a moving target, because Kubernetes, there are some schools of thought that are like, Kubernetes security is just part of cloud security, and why are you keep talking about this? Because I feel like I've been talking about it for way too long. So that school of thought is, I think, a little bit dangerous, just because when you start just kind of CSPMifying your world and like looking at things in like a checklist, you're going to miss some pretty important detail. And you're right. Like in EC2 instance, we don't have like EC2 security as a domain that you pursue. And that's because virtualization and servers have just kind of been around the block for a long time, and they don't have quite the breadth, I would say, that Kubernetes does. So if you just like extract the cloud from Kubernetes and look at what the project is, it's not really even meant to just run in a cloud. Like, we see Kubernetes and we work with customers that run Kubernetes on airplanes, on ships, in like IoT devices, at Chick-fil-A. And like, when you look at it like an operating system that is capable of doing a lot of things and like being completely customizable, it has multiple control planes, it has a networking stack, it has a secrets management stack. The simple way to put it is like, it's a data center inside of your data center. And whether that's a cloud or on-prem, it is a little different, right? Like you're not, that could be looked at as complication, or it's just, that's what it's used for. So I think it warrants extra attention. It's why 2.5 years ago, I decided to write the OWASP top 10 for Kubernetes, because I've been doing this for so long. At the end of every discussion, it's like, can you just tell me the 10 things? Like, this sounds way more complicated than I thought it was going to be. What do I need to care about? And we don't like see the success of they're in the serverless top 10, but like, is that really the thing? Yeah, it's important, but Kubernetes is one of the most actively developed open source projects on planet Earth. And that's a lot different than saying like Lambda functions. Like, that's not even an open source thing. There's not a conference around it. There's not an ecosystem around it. So it's kind of its own, unique beast. And I do think it requires more than a checkbox. And I've always said that for years and years. And I'll probably stand by that for a while still, until I don't have to, and it's all fixed.
No, I think that's a good point. I think you said something interesting, right? So if you're using a managed Kubernetes service within a cloud provider, then maybe you can still consider it to be like an extension of your cloud security program. But
Yeah.
assuming as an industry that Kubernetes security is the same as cloud security is dangerous and it will not lead us in the right direction. So I think maybe there are like, depending on what your role is, you may have to look at it differently. That makes sense too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree.
Okay. Anshuman, did you have the next question for Jimmy?
Yeah. So I'm gonna switch gears slightly. So starting a company can be difficult for both personal and professional lives. You have two boys, Jimmy. I have two boys. I also happen
Yeah.
to know your co-founder, Brooke. So
Mhm.
can you sort of walk us through, at what point did you know that what you're doing is actually working and uh, you wanted to continue the same route? Like, can you just kind of share your story as to what uh, gave you that assurance that your idea is valid?
Yeah. That's another ongoing concerted effort. It's so to just like level set. There's two types of companies one can pursue. There's multiple, but at least in security, you're either going the venture backed route, which that's what we did, and that's what I'm kind of equipped to talk about, or there's plenty of opportunity in the like independent consulting or bootstrapped, or there's a lot of different ways to kind of carve your own unique business to start. And being venture backed in cybersecurity is a unique path that we chose. I would say I made that decision without knowing exactly all the details of what that meant, but no one does until you do it. So that's what we're talking about now. There's a lot of examples of other companies with different stresses and pain points and whatnot that aren't in the venture back camp. So the decision, since for me, you need to surround yourself. If this is something you want to do, you have to start surrounding yourself with people who have done it and can get you inroads, who can be mentorship is important, but it's not the same mentorship you have in like your career. I've had that in the past. I've given that in the past. This is an area it's not just about technical capability, right? It's not just about like a lot of founders have some prior accolades and things, and it's easy to think that's going to carry you into a successful business, and it is not. I can guarantee you there's nothing that you've done in your past that ensures future success, especially your first time. So second time founders, again, that's not the conversation. That's a whole different path too. So for me, I've spent a few years at Signal Sciences. I led the security research team. I was one of the first customers at Signal Sciences. Those guys are friends, mentors. We spend time together. And being through that journey, getting to an acquisition point. I wasn't the founder, but I got to be directly involved in a lot of those things. I kept building this confidence loop where it's like, okay, like I know where the problems are. I know the space. I know the products. I know like who to ask questions when I have them. And I think that coupled with my domain expertise, Brooke's domain expertise, she is a go-to-market savant like for years in cybersecurity. I'm not. So who to pick on the founding team is immensely important. You want complementary skills. You don't want like carbon copy replicas. Even though that seems cool, you get to work with someone who is just like you and does the same thing. That's not going to help you build a scalable business. And I think the initial idea is, I'll say this generically, like any initial idea of a startup is subject to change at any moment because you are at the whim of market forces. You're at the whim of competition. You're at the whim of a daily changing ecosystem with demands or breaches that occur that you want to be aligned with. There's so many different inputs into what you're shipping and delivering. And then once you get customers, that's part of the loop too. Like I need certain features to accomplish this job. So, think keeping a mission that's, targeted enough, but also leaves you some flexibility of what you can accomplish is really important. Like if you're just like dead set on one thing and you're just going to deliver it, come hell or high water, and you're not listening to those signals, maybe you'll get lucky, but maybe you won't. And you'll build something that nobody wants by the time it's ready. And that is challenging. So I think you should be tackling a problem that has a healthy future, right? Like, and we've seen that not work out. Timing is important in this equation, right? Like security it's a moving target. So, all of that being said, that's like the mental space that I was in, but it's easy to talk about now. But when you're in it, you're just like, you're going 1,000 miles an hour and trying to find product market fit. And, that's your lifeblood. So you have to find that as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And speaking about signal sciences, I know you mentioned that. I remember when signal sciences was coming up in the news with the runtime application security protection solutions. I got pretty interested as well because, as an AppSec practitioner, finding vulnerabilities in real time was something that I hadn't heard of before, right? Now, I personally haven't, I've worked in a few companies. I haven't seen a lot of companies implement RASP solutions to the effect that it is actually providing value. I have tried to implement once a solution called T-Cell, I believe. I think it was later acquired by Rapid7 or something. And my experience was, I don't know, like I wasn't completely sold on it. I know a RAD Security and the platform that you're working on, the company that you've co-founded, it happens to solve some of these problems during the Kubernetes runtime, right? So curious to see what you think about the difference between, like an infrastructure runtime versus an application runtime. And where do you think we faltered?
Yeah, Signal Sciences had a RASP offering, and you have to remember too that RASP is circa 2012, right? So it is like that's a long time ago. And RASP, or runtime application self protection, is, I think it was ahead of its time. If it kind of had the right idea where like I'm gonna hook into the application. WAFs had been around for a long time, and they, we were iterating on the WAF concept at Signal Sciences, but like a WAF is like a giant net, and you're just hoping to catch the thing that's generically, it's just generic, right? It's like a giant firewall. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's a lot of false positives, there's a lot of false negatives. It's a checkbox. But RASP was meant to be hyper targeted on like the language runtime. So like Java, whatever, Go. And that idea is pretty compelling. The problem was implementation is a pain, right? Where you're using like these libraries and SDKs. You had to like get developers on board to like inject all this new code in their application. And so for vendors, like you have this support problem where you're creating all this, maintaining all these packages and all this crazy stuff and corner cases, and it just became harder to, implement than what you were getting out of it. So RASP, it, had its time in the spotlight, but then I think it just was hard to use. Like it was hard to use no matter what. And the attack surface that you're looking at with RASP is like very small, right? So eBPF came on the scene, and that, like we don't use the term RASP really. I feel like it's dead, kind of like we don't use that term. But if eBPF is the safe way to hook into the kernel, where you get broader protection generically, no developer interaction, it's a one shot install, and you see network, you see system call, you see function level. All the things you can get from eBPF, and the protection you can put into play generically is just like much, much better and easier. Developers don't even know it's there. And you get the benefits of what was promised of RASP with less overhead. And that's what we use today. eBPF kind of
Yeah.
was the reason we could evolve past it, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know there's some API security companies that are also using eBPF as a core technology. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Thandesh, please go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of feel like ADR is the new, RASP, or whatever. Like it's
Yeah.
just new, like a old bottle new wine. But I'm excited about eBPF, right? So I had a couple of questions for you there. So,
Yeah.
I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum where we're building like automated security design reviews and, playing more in the threat modeling space, shift left and all those things, right? And obviously, I'm bullish on that, but shift left has its own limitation. It's not, it's kind of great at enabling developers, but it's not the source of truth. Right. So there's always kind of this debate between shifting left and shifting right. My personal opinion is that it's not an either or. I mean, it's about what works best for your company and things like that, right? But one of the things I always think about is that the definition of what an application is very, very different with each company. So when you think about like thinking about combining, so when you think about cloud security, you think component by component, right? And that makes complete sense. You think container image by container image, and then figure out how they network together. But there's no kind of logical grouping, which is more tied to what the business is, right? There's no definition of what an application is. There may be 3 microservices talking to an auth service, and that may be a definition of a product or an application, right? So since you're like an AppSec person who's kind of working in the infrastructure space now, how do you kind of square off this dichotomy of saying, hey, if I'm going to do AppSec, quote unquote AppSec, in the production layer, how do I kind of make that logical component work? Like, how do I detect what an application is versus what a microservice is or what a container is? The latter is easy, but how do we think about the logical, I guess, combination of multiple services? Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I kind of feel like that's the hard part about application security in eBPF or in production, right? So if you have any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, we talk about this all the time. It's so hard to connect the dots and build association trees and maps from like, you're going from like system call to like, what is the business calling like backend foobar, whatever application. And you don't just do like business logic's one part, but we try to do it also for identities, right? Because like a UID that the kernel sees, like our customers want to know, well, who is that in Okta? And you're like, well, that's pretty tough to like map from like the lowest level basically all the way to like your system of record, your IDP, and similar problems. So I think if you look at purely just Kubernetes, there are some logical boundaries you can derive, right, that are beyond container, right? Container and image. They go into deployment. Oftentimes namespace is at least some bucket of like, these things are supposed to work together. Now, are they considered a product or an application to the business? Not always with a namespace, but you can keep deriving ownership through tags, annotations, things that you expect to be there until you hit the wall where you're like, I don't have tags. Like you didn't tag anything and you're just chucking everything into the same namespace. And then you have a problem of just it's basically like a reverse engineering problem where you're looking at like network patterns. eDPF can help you like, hey, these microservices always talk to one another. They're on the same namespace. Maybe they're in different clusters or whatever, but we still know that they're probably tightly coupled. So I think all that being said, I don't think that is solved yet by anybody very intelligently, where you can like infer boundaries of application logic that well. And maybe the answer is going the other way, outside in, right? Kind of tracing, like if it's a web application, like doing full tracing from the user interface, almost like DAST style view into the world, and then meeting somewhere in the middle. because it is important for people to say, like, this is my application. I don't care about your application. I need to make sure mine's secure. And maybe also the best way to do it is ask the CFO, right? Like, 'cause, I mean, application owners usually have to kind of at least say what they're going to spend money on and what cloud infrastructure, all this stuff. So there could be like a FinOps play there, but yeah, there's a lot of ways to try to infer from the lowest level, which I would say eBPF is, but it's still, I think that's still an evolving piece of the puzzle for us and most others.
Yeah. No, I think you make a good point, right? So while I was at Razorpay, we were able to solve that problem for Razorpay because there were certain patterns about the company that we were aware of. And therefore, it's easy to solve it. But to solve it for the market or for the industry is hard because, like you said, there's no definition of what an application is, which is common across everywhere. And there's so many ways to network Kubernetes or in general the cloud that it's very hard to kind of build a solution, right? But the reason, in my opinion, is really important though, is that the way you build accountability in application security programs is by assigning it to the right application teams, right? And how that squares off against the infrastructure you are securing kind of becomes hard. So I mean, I haven't thought enough about it. Definitely not as much as you have, but kind of feels like the solution is somewhere between allowing humans to define what an application is and then kind of translating that into the product. Like, let the human decide what the application is, and then once they define it, then the product knows what to do with it, right? I'm pretty sure the company to figure it out will definitely kind of it's going to be a step function increase in usability of security products when we eventually figure out how to attribute what we see in infrastructure to an application team. So we'll see when we get there.
Yeah, it's another good point to that is like, it depends who your customer is, right? Like if AppSec's the goal, and honestly, like we work with cloud security teams, infra security, detection and response, which are it's not that they're not, they need to know who the owner is, but they're not necessarily, they're more concerned with like, did this image come from a valid source, or like, how did they get there? What's the control plane? Are the secrets loaded correctly? So infrastructure as a consumer is a lot different than like, this is my application and its constituent pieces. So I think you have to define who the consumer is. We are seeing more movement into application owners for us specifically. And so we're going to be tackling this head on here shortly. So we'll keep you posted on the next podcast, I guess, how we figure it out.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. I'm also noticing that a lot of infrastructure security is kind of moving under what's now being called product security. I recently spoke to a team where the head of application security reported to the head of product security. So product security is almost everything which is to do with the product, like the software, the infrastructure, the engineering, the automation. And then security operations only deals with like incidents, right? Which for me was very different from what I had seen, which is more like AppSec, CloudSec, are like two different things, right? So maybe there's like a convergence there as well, which kind of makes it simpler because now we have the same stakeholders working on the infra stuff and the application stuff.
It's messy. That's all I have to say about that. It's infrastructure and application security are in a blender right now. I feel like they're you can't just be worried about application security these days. It just doesn't. It's not. You're not doing yourself any favors if that's all you do. You're going to have to understand what a container is and all these different pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Sandesh, do you have any questions before I?
No, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So, Jimmy, like when we think about Kubernetes, right? Like I'm thinking 8-9 years ago when it was a pretty exciting technology, just like AI is these days, right? Where folks like yourself were building companies on securing Kubernetes infrastructure, whereas folks as me, we were trying to see how we can use Kubernetes to scale AppSec. I remember there were quite a few frameworks and tools where we had these different security tools like Nmap, all these different scanners, and spawning those tools inside a container and then orchestrating everything inside a Kubernetes infrastructure seemed like what is this, right? Like, and then there were technologies like Argo you mentioned. So
Yeah.
on the similar lines, I want to know your thoughts on what do you think about AI, and like, because there are two aspects to this as well, right? We can build companies to secure AI initiatives within enterprises, and then we can also use AI, which I think like Sandesh is doing for his company, right, to sort of solve security problems at scale. So, what are your thoughts on this technology and how this is sort of evolving? And how do you see AI impacting what you're doing?
Yeah. Wouldn't be a discussion without AI. So for good reason. And before I get into that, you mentioned using Kubernetes to kind of scale your Nmap and other security testing tools. Um, I have I gave a talk at AppSec USA in 2016 called Containerizing Your Security Operations Center. I don't recommend that anybody watch it. I will not watch it again. But that's exactly what that talk was. It was like, I just Dockerized a bunch of random, like all the OG stuff, Nmap and Dirbuster. And I built these like janky scripts, and then I deployed them on basically like a bare metal Kubernetes cluster and gave a talk about it. I don't think anybody understood anything that I was saying, and it was not a good talk, but that was from a long time ago. But back to your kind of AI question, I think anybody that's worked in security for any amount of time has a healthy dose of skepticism, right? With all the things, right? And like the future, for me, that stems from just like being involved in like enterprise security and like the pace at which like the Twitter sphere goes, and then the pace at which the reality is, which is like completely different. You're dealing with just trying to like make things work and not topple over, and like just the basics, and you're way behind the kind of bleeding edge typically. And for AI specifically, I probably took a similar skeptical approach in the beginning, but was always watching it. Like I'm sure both of you were, like kind of like keeping a pulse on it. And then certain like Kubernetes, there were certain inflection points with certain models, and then price structure that started to align in a way where we as a company decided to like, hey, how can we, and we were confronting like a new problem, right? And this problem was either solvable. It was a literal fork in the road where we were like, we can use the thing we've been using for like 20 years, basically, like we can write rules, Sigma, these things, and we're just going to blend in, right? And like, we're going to use those, and it's probably going to work and meet some level of expectation. Or we can try something completely different and throw those to the side and use an LLM based approach. And if you, any founders out there, that like differentiation is key, and like blending in is absolutely not what you're supposed to be doing when you're starting an early stage startup. So we took a very AI centric approach. So like I did with Kubernetes early days, I just dove in, I had the team dive in, we experimented, we built test harnesses, we tried different models, we basically leveled up really quickly. And our technology that we built was this really smart blend of like traditional codified drift detection and like kind of understanding behaviors first, and then using LLMs as that final assessment engine or reasoning engine. And it didn't work perfectly at first, like as most things don't, but I feel like we dove in so deep that we were like, we're going to figure this out. And through persistence, we found something that worked like amazingly well for our use case. We know how to use it, how to test it, how to run it in enterprise. It's like built into the product. And so I'm a believer, but I'm also still skeptical, if that makes sense. Like I'm not going to be shouting that like Like,
Yeah.
like it's not like, I'm shouting about NFTs or something. Like, I'm still like, we are going to take a
Yeah.
very engineering centric approach. And I think there's a lot of untapped value to be had to build products more efficiently that work amazingly well. Like, it just, you really think about it, you're like, you have this domain, this body of knowledge you're drawing from. And if you know how to harness it, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not 100% accuracy, but we didn't have 100% accuracy anyways. Like, it was way worse because if you didn't have the rule that was written, you weren't detecting
Yeah.
anything. So it's like, I'd rather go forward and with the latest and greatest than try to be stuck in the past. So we are all in, and we're investing more. So
Yeah. I'm into that, man. Yeah. Like
yeah,
I think all of us, including like Sandesh, we've been playing with LLMs and seeing how it can help us. And I work for an employer, so um, I don't get to explore fully, but even based on my limited experimentation, I really believe that if anything, it can help us increase the coverage and the visibility that we just didn't have before. So yeah, I'm also really excited and looking forward to this whole revolution.
yeah,
Sandesh, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, I mean, I kind of agree with Jimmy on most things that he said. I mean, in the end, look, LLMs are a tool. They're a very, very powerful tool. And
yeah,
if there's a way of doing it, the first ML engineer that I worked with when I started CISO said something interesting. He said, if you don't care about latency and if you don't care about cost and you're okay on accuracy, literally everything in computing can be done using LLMs. That is true. But those three are
yep,
very big constraints, right? And depending on what your use case is, you have like knobs to push on how much leeway you have on latency, accuracy, and cost, right? So yeah, I mean, look, when we started, exactly like Jimmy said, like we went all in on LLMs and made LLMs do everything, and then we can have to dial it back because we are like, yeah, it's a tool, and you can't just punt everything to an LLM, right?
correct.
And on the skepticism part, it took me like 5 years after working in companies who use the cloud to say no one's going to move stuff to somebody else's computer. Like that was my opinion all the way up to like 2014, and then I had to
Right.
stop being a Luddite and then move away from what my thinking is, right? So I think a healthy, dose of skepticism is good for security folks. But honestly, I mean, I think just like Jimmy said, the possibilities are unlimited. And in general, the amount of manual workflows we have in security just means that there's going to be scope for using LLMs to kind of cut down on some of those workflows, right? And a lot of those problem statements may not be technical in nature. They may be more workflow related, program management related, which we can cut down on. So yeah, so I think if you can, if you look at LLMs as a tool and then try to find a problem statement, that may be the wrong way to go about it. But I think it's a good idea to relook at every problem we have in cybersecurity, saying, hey, if I have this new tool set, how would I now design a solution, right? And I think when we do
Absolutely.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
If I put my like CTO hat on, not just security, like
yeah,
I manage a team of engineers, product people. Like, I run a
yeah,
company that needs to be efficient. Efficiency is everything these days. So, we are, I don't think that we're done hiring engineers. That's quite the
yeah,
opposite. I think if we can level up the engineering, efforts that we have with, co-pilots and all these other things, like, why not? Like, why would we not use the tools available to us? Obviously we need to double check our work. We need to make sure that we understand how these things operate, but, um, either that or your competitor is going to do it and you're going to get left in the dust. So,
left behind. Yeah,
yeah, so we're pressing forward. It's been exciting. I think it's like a breath of fresh air and somewhat, I feel like people were trying to make up things that were sounded exciting for a few years there. It's just, not to pick on anything in particular, but you could name walk around KubeCon, Wasm and all these different things, which are super, super impressive technologies, but nothing's quite captured the hearts and minds like
yeah,
Gen AI. Like that, nothing even
yeah.
comes close.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think after mobile and public cloud, this is probably the most exciting, usable, practical technology we've had. So this is great. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. All
All
right.
right. I have one more question before we can wrap it up. So, uh, Jamie, considering the fact that you have been an investor and an advisor as well, and especially in this world, right? Like where security vendors are known to be selling snake oil in like some aspect, right? And especially with AI, like anybody can just use OpenAI's APIs and kind of offer it as a service and call it a company. How do you decide? Like, do you have a framework of which companies you invest in and advise?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, being a founder and investor, to say I'm an investor is just, I mean, I will support people that I believe can build transformational technology, only through my past experience with them, right? I'm not a professional investor just doing pitches, dealing with pitches or anything, but like, if I can share some lessons over the past 3 or so years with folks who are starting the journey, whether that's, them raising more money or, you know, trying to get to product market fit and like just understanding the space. And I know that person pretty well, and I know that they're going to do what it takes, then I'm more than happy to, lend a hand. So my rubric is like different than that of like a professional investor, for sure. And it's more of like, for me, as like the mentorship ladder goes, I think you need different folks at different phases, right? So like you need someone who's the 1 to 2 years ahead, who's like kind of like still operating on the same wavelength as you. You need somebody who had, at the 5+ year mark, and then somebody who's exited and dealt with those negotiations. And if you're a founder, you have to surround yourself by varying opinions, and you have to take them all with a grain of salt. And anybody listening to me should also do the same, right? Everyone's experience is unique. But if somebody is like, hey, you are right in that sweet spot for me and I need help and you can help me and you went through it, and I trust that person, and I don't have a lot of time, so I don't do it, much as I'd like, but I will definitely get involved and help other founders. I think when you meet founders, even like at conferences and stuff, you like want to give each other a hug or something. It's like it's like a different, it's just different. You're like, I know what you're going through. Right. And, so that's my philosophy, but maybe in the future I'll do more kind of like advising, investing. We'll see. But, for now it's just like, if I find a gem and it's somebody I trust, then I'm game to help.
Sounds good. Awesome. Sandesh, do you have anything, or shall we
No,
wrap it up?
I think we can wrap it up. Well, thank you very much, Jimmy, for joining us. This was great.
Yep.
Like I said,
Yeah.
we're doing the whole season 2 with just like founders, so it's great to hear kind of how different the stories are with each of them. So yeah,
Cool.
thank you for spending a good part of the last hour with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Anytime, guys. Yeah, appreciate you having me.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jimmy.
All right.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Thank you for joining us. If you like the show, please share this with your friends and colleagues. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach Anshuman on Twitter at Anshuman_BH. That's ANSHUMAN_BH. And me, Sandesh, at Jubba on Jeans. That's JUBBAONJEANS. See you next time.